Now, it looks like Jay Powell lives to see another day as the chair of the Federal Reserve. President Trump earlier pouring cold water on online chatter, claiming Powell is about to get fired. But don't get it twisted. The president is still no fan of the man in charge of our nation's monetary policy.
It's not a tough job, to be honest. Assuming you're smart, it's not a tough job. If you're a dummy, then I guess it's a tough job. But it might be one of the easiest jobs I've ever seen. And
are you completely ruling out the idea of firing Jerome Powell?
I don't rule out anything, but I think it's highly unlikely unless he has to leave for fraud. I mean, it's possible there's fraud involved with the $2.7 billion renovation. This is a renovation. How do you spend $2.7 billion? But I think he's not doing a good job. He's got a very easy job to do. You know what he has to do? Lower interest rates.
$2.5 billion thereabouts. That's just a little mid-morning snack when you look at the total financial damage done by Powell, this partisan hack. In just the last 3 years, the central bank has racked up a whopping $235 billion in losses. Those are your tax dollars not working or missing. But we don't need to tell you that the Fed head is bad with money. Joining us live at the desk, Unleash Prosperity Senior Fellow and the Heritage Foundation Chief Economist, EJ Antoni, because Jay Powell and his cronies created the cost of living crisis with skyrocketing inflation by blowing out the balance sheet, just printing money hand over fist, aiding and abetting Joe Biden and the spending, but then hiking interest rates to the moon and creating a vice that they twisted and crushed the American people with.
Exactly, Dagan. And you know, you can debate whether or not they should have had the low interest rate policy in 2020, whether they printed too much money back then. And I understand that whole discussion. But by the time you get to 2021, there's no excuse anymore. It's clear the worst of the pandemic is over. It's clear the economy's reopening. We don't need to be spending and printing money hand over fist. There was no reason to keep interest rates so low for so long. That gave us the 40-year high inflation you're talking about. It was then followed up with the fastest rise in interest rates in 40 years, and that deadly combination has completely frozen over the housing market. It gave us the over $200 billion in losses that you were talking about, and those are just realized losses. The Fed has another $1 trillion in unrealized losses sitting on its balance sheet. So by no means is the problem over.
I don't think they should fire him, though. I think, make him miserable.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Sick me on it.
Give him the Dagan treatment instead of the Powell Palace that he wants. All right, so I'm going to play a little contrarian here and ask you, you're a smart enough guy to figure this out. Is there any argument that Powell could ever have September, half percent cut, November, 0.25, December, 25 basis points? Is there any argument? Because I can't find it.
No, and then no cuts this year at
all.
And
no cuts when the conditions are better right now.
Exactly. So that stark contrast is I think, very, very telling, you guys, because what you saw last year, if you compare those data to today's data, it's very, very clear today's numbers are more in favor of an interest rate cut than back in the fall. The difference was back then we had an election. And so there was no justification.
So it was a partisan hack then?
I think so, absolutely, because there was just no empirical justification for what he did. So then you have to look elsewhere to try to figure out what his motivations were.
And so I want to get to this because I can never pass up on EWASI and Elizabeth Warren soundbite, David. Fox Business tracked down Senator Elizabeth Warren this afternoon, and she is just screaming to the high heavens about what would happen if Jay Powell got ass-canned.
Donald Trump, to try to fire Jerome Powell, will crash our markets, and he needs to stop this nonsense. You know, the idea of getting out there, maybe he will, maybe he won't. He may think that's fun because he gets lots of attention, but the underlying reality is that undermines our entire financial system, and it makes us the laughingstock around the world.
I don't understand why people act like Jay Powell's beyond reproach, that he's swaddled in some golden fleece and protected by the man almighty on high. But she, like her Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, is actually the basis for why he legitimately could be fired, because they're supposed to be funding it and they don't have profits to fund it.
Exactly. So those losses that were on the screen earlier means the Fed has no profits, which means they have no profits to fund the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, as you just said. Absolutely. So Powell has been creating money without the authorization to do so for financing that agency. That is breaking the law. You could fire him, in my opinion, for cause on those grounds. But let's also not forget that Pocahontas was the one who signed the letter to Jerome Powell saying you need to cut not just 50 basis points, but 75 right before the election. And now today she says, oh, no, you can't remove him. You need to keep him in place so he can keep rates high. Just the hypocrisy of D.C. is disgusting.
Well, I mean, look, if it wasn't for hypocrisy, they'd have no stance at all. We know that. But we're talking about an issue that provides an argument, which is fiduciary responsibility, if you want to take that tact on it. If you were in a corporation, Jay Powell could be fired. I get what Dagan's saying. I'm all there. But when you say that, I wonder, is there a point at which if he doesn't do something, the president takes the public hit, makes his life miserable still, and maybe, I don't know, does he have a reason to fire him? I mean, you're losing money, right? You're not by the way, the CFPB shouldn't exist, but that's a whole other argument.
Sure. I think that there is definitely cause to fire him if you want to go down that route.
It's a fight.
Right. Are you going to disrupt markets a lot? Possibly, but he's all Powell's
the
already
market's going to
disrupting.
see this because they're not dumb. Jamie Dimon's not dumb. The real market movers aren't dumb. Your argument and what Dagan laid out, this makes sense.
Yeah, but Jamie's not the market.
That's true, but I think Powell is already disrupting markets. He has put the Fed in a position where they're basically competing against the Treasury. That's one of the things that's pushing up Treasury yields right now and making the debt more expensive to finance.
Amen. It is not Donald Trump, the President of the United States, and what he has to say that is the problem. It is the man with his hand in the till with no money in it, and that's Jay Powell. He's the problem. EJ Antoni, you're the best.
Good to
Thank you,
see you.
sir.